Hello everybody and welcome to an overview of Godfall. To give the shortest summary I can, Godfall lacks in key areas such as longevity, but succeeds in others such as theory crafting and combat. And most importantly, man oh man is it fun. Very fun to play. If you're only here for a verdict on whether or not to buy Godfall right now in its current state, I'd say that if you really enjoy action RPGs and loot grinds, or if you've been curious about the genre and have wanted to dive in for a while, take the plunge with Godfall. You will get your $60 worth of value despite the flaws. In all other cases, wait for it to go on sale. I would not purchase it for more than $40. The game needs a little more time in the oven to meet the value of a $60 asking price for non-action junkies. 70 on consoles. Jeez, I feel bad for you guys. That being said, I spent my own $60 on this game. This video is not sponsored in any way, and in my almost 24 hours of playtime in the first 2 days, despite the many flaws, which I will cover, yeah, I'd say I got my money's worth. Hover over the video now or check the description for timestamps if you're only looking for a specific section. Otherwise, here's a brief overview of the game. I'll just get this out of the way first. You probably heard Godfall being compared to other games such as Warframe, Dark Souls, Diablo, and Destiny, just to name some. While comparisons between those titles do hold some ground, why wouldn't the devs take inspiration from successful games in similar genres? I assure you that Godfall stands on its own 2 feet, separate from the rest. It may draw from other games, but its experience as a whole is unique to it and it alone. Here's the best way I can put it. It's the aesthetic of Warframe with the combat of Dark Souls or God of War, but like taken 10 notches up, with the loot from Destiny and the theory crafting from Path of Exile. If you mishmash all of those things together, you get Godfall. Now, hold on, I know what you're thinking. Man, is he really trying to say that Godfall does what those games do, but better? No, at least not in all cases, but in one very specific... Hey! What? I'm trying to tell them that the combat is insanely good and probably the best action combat I've ever experienced, and boy have I experienced some fun action combat in my time, let me tell you something. Oh, sorry, I just really like killing stuff in this game. I can't help it. Fair enough, please continue. I'm gonna be honest here, I don't care about the lore, I don't care about the writing, I don't care about the level design, and I especially don't care about the graphics in an action RPG. Do you know what I care about in an action RPG? If you've seen any reviewer talking about this game's bland level design, lack of good writing, too similar aesthetic, the day one bugs, the lack of matchmaking, whatever it may be, if they're telling you more about those things that have nothing to do with the action, their priorities are completely out of whack. Don't get me wrong, I'm not ignoring and especially not excusing any of those complaints. You will hear more about them later in this very video, but the core of Godfall, the foundation that holds everything else up, is the combat, and it needs to be analyzed to the fullest extent. If anyone has told you that the combat is bad, boring, derivative, or simplistic, they are not giving you the full picture. Did this guy really just say that the opinions of others are wrong? What an idiot. No, I said that they're not accurately representing the core game mechanic of Godfall, which is doing you and everyone else a huge disservice. This game is not easy. If you make a mistake, you will be punished instantly. This game is also not a light attack spam simulator, despite what you may be thinking after seeing some, shall we say, not even out of the first zone gameplay. Sure, cannon fodder enemies will charge at you with no real thought or strategy other than to jam the pointy end of their stick into you, but anything above the guys that take 2 or 3 hits to kill require a different approach. Building up a tanky enemy soul shatter for an execute, or breaching their defenses for a stun, tossing your shield at a healer or a nimble assassin for a free takedown, parrying a massive hit to expose and exploit the enemy's weak point, the list goes on. You are making these split-second decisions against every enemy you encounter, and the game forces you to understand its mechanics, else it punishes you immediately. Great, now I have to sit here and think about every little detail instead of just being in the moment and fighting bad guys. Have you been watching the background footage at all? The combat is fast and fluid as heck. I wasn't lying early when I said this game has some of the most fun combat I've ever played. It's snappy and responsive, it's fast-paced, and it urges you to keep moving. And again, it's fun. I'm not saying it's perfect. Why in the world does everything knock me down? But I'll be darned if you can't see the level level of detail and care that has gone into Godfall's combat system. Instead of picking apart every single negative or flat out wrong piece of information I've heard about the combat system from others, let me instead give you the secret sauce to experiencing the combat in the best way possible. Are you ready for this? Play the game on hard difficulty. That's it. I know, elitist this, elitist that, but I'm being serious here. I played for the first 4 or 5 hours on the default difficulty, and after switching to hard, I couldn't help but feel that it was the way the developers wanted me to play. Switching to hard fixed every complaint I had about the combat. No more infinite respawns. You get 3 lives per mission, including the boss fights. Enemies are more aggressive, much more aggressive. They do not relent and will do everything they can to ensure your death, and health drops are removed from non-elite enemies entirely. This is not listed, but it's a major component to hard difficulty, especially with the 0 passive region in the game. All of these factors combined makes hard mode a vastly different gameplay loop, and one that is much more interesting and ultimately more gratifying to learn and experience. If it were up to me, I would say remove the other 2 difficulties and just keep hard as the baseline experience. If you are on the fence at all about Godfall's combat based on what you've seen, I'm telling you now, if you invest the time to learning its system, it is insanely fun. This being an action RPG and looter slasher, the systems that support combat, your build, also matter quite a bit. I'm not going to go as far to say that the theory crafting and min-maxing is excellent, but it sure as heck ain't bad. It's not too simple that you'll annihilate everything regardless of your choices in your skill tree, gear, augments, etc., but it's also not too complicated that you'll have to sit and contemplate every single modifier on a piece of gear and ensure it synergizes exactly with what you need. The game is clearly catered towards both ARPG veterans and casuals alike, and it finds a happy medium between the two in its depth and complexity. For example, the weapons and gear you'll have a main stat, damage for weapons or an attribute for gear, a primary modifier, which is the implicit or base stat of the item, such as chance to curse, crit chance, damage on full life, etc., and then up to 4 secondary modifiers depending on the item's rarity. The main stat and implicit modifier will be the same on a given item every time, save for some slight variance in the value of the rolls, meaning that this polearm here will always give void damage and a chance to curse, regardless of the rarity, but the damage value will go up and new secondary modifiers will be added with higher rarity. The curse chance, which is the implicit mod, simply rolls at random between 8 and 10%. This means that the secondary mods are really the only ones you need to worry about, as there are plenty of rolls to get and some are much better than others. The skill tree is also a nice balance between simple and complex. The layout is a grid where you can freely choose any of the 4 corners and path to any connected nodes from thereafter. Each node has a max of 5 points that can be spent on it, with each point usually providing a different bonus from the last. There are a few exceptions, such as health recovery, just giving straight health recovery for each point spent, but for the most part you will see different effects. For some nodes, such as rampage and polarity attacks, you'll get entirely new skills to use in combat, while for the rest you'll simply receive passive benefits. Also, respecs are completely free, so if you make a mistake or want to change your build on a whim, you are free to do so. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Valor Plates. These were advertised as your class and that they will completely change the way you play. At least they were heavily insinuated to perform in that way. In reality, Valor Plates are the direct opposite. Instead of you building around your plate of choice, instead you choose a plate that suits your items of choice. I should note here that I've played the game exclusively as a solo player, so some of what I'll say here may be different for those playing multiplayer. For example, I used the default plate Silvermane until I got a cool earth damage weapon as a drop, and then switched to Mesa for her innate chance to poison, which synergizes with that earth damage. Then I used the Valor Plate for the intended way. I was getting absolutely rolled by a fight about halfway through the game, so I switched to the Crabman, Aegis Horn, yeah, okay buddy, sure, for his big boy 5% damage reduction. Shortly after beating the fight, I got another awesome weapon, this time a void damage polearm, so I went back and chose Mobius for its synergy with curses and void damage. And that's about it. Do you notice any trends in that little story? Yeah, 10% poison chance and 5% damage reduction are hardly build enablers and merely the optimal choice. The active components of the plates, called your Archon Fury, aren't any better either. Summon 3 dudes, emit a shockwave, get increased stats or benefits while under specific conditions. That's it. Your ultimate ability, which lasts 30 seconds at most, the duration goes down every time you take damage instead of you actually losing HP, and has a cooldown of around 3 minutes without any investment, which means Archon Fury hardly provides anything more than glorified stat increases. It's like removing all of a champion's abilities in League of Legends and only giving them an ultimate, and then saying saying, hey, at least they can auto attack and build items. It's not interesting, nor is it a meaningful choice outside of pure min-maxing to use one plate over another. Speaking of choice, or lack thereof, ailments. The ailments in this game are actually hilarious. Not only is there next to no information in the game about how they function and scale, this is all of the information that you get. Turns out it doesn't even matter because they're all the same. That's not a hyperbole. All the ailments do exactly the same thing. Damage over time. That's it. Can you tell which enemy is burning, which one is bleeding, and which one is cursed? Also, good luck scaling ailments because the way they deal damage is a complete mystery. Let's look at those clips again. What if I told you that the weapon with the highest damage inflicted the weakest ailment here? I've noticed that bosses take more damage from ailments than other enemies, but have a drastically lower chance of being afflicted. Is it because the damage and proc chance are based off of max HP? Does the damage go up but the chance goes down? Is it current health? Who knows? Whatever the answer may be, the point still stands. Ailments need a lot of work done to them. As far as I know, all other combat-related systems seem to work just fine. Rampage, soul shatters, breaching, polarity attacks, I've heard of no issues nor experienced any myself. Alright, let's talk the big kahuna. Endgame, the loot grind. Is it meaningful? Is it fun? The best answer I can give to both is kind of. I've played about 10 hours of the endgame thus far, 3 of which have been at max level, and I can see myself putting at least 10 or 20 more hours into the game in its current state, which I should mention is before the first patch has even gone live. I'm having a ton of fun due to the combat alone, but once the novelty wears off, I can see myself quickly losing interest due to the lack of proper endgame. Currently, you have 2 options. The first, Dreamstones, where you complete 3 to 4 rounds that progress you towards a final boss encounter. Each round has 2 available missions to choose from, which will both apply different modifiers to your final Dreamstone encounter. However, this choice can easily be boiled down to, do you want more or less loot? It specifically tells you the option that grants a boss reward, and in my mind, why the heck would I want less rewards while running in-game content? The answer, I wouldn't. The missions range from hunting specific elite targets, the same ones you can hunt in the non-in-game activities, to literal one-to-one copies of campaign missions with tutorial pop-ups and all. Yeah, some corners have clearly been cut here. Your second and final option for the endgame is the Tower of Trials. It's an infinitely scaling zone that consists of you fighting progressively harder waves of enemies and collecting keys to open chests. The better you do, the more keys you receive and the more chests you can open. I've played a couple hours inside of the tower and I've gotta say it, the loot is terrible compared to Dreamstones, to the point where it's not even worth running outside of the fun factor of facing endless hordes of enemies until they inevitably outscale you. And well, that's all you have for in-game content. As I said, I'm still having tons of fun with the combat alone, so I'll be playing the content for a little while longer, no matter how similar it may start to feel. After all, this is an action RPG and a grind is what I signed up for. However, with the lack of true multiplayer, as in matchmaking and an online ecosystem in general, the push for god rolls, get it, weapons and gear doesn't have much substance to it, if any at all. The loot is varied and the build diversity is high enough to warrant some level of a grind, but does it all accumulate to an endgame that you'll be sinking hundreds of hours into? No, definitely not. But if you like min-maxing your character and trying new ideas out on a dime, you will enjoy the loot grind and endgame of Godfall for a good amount of time. If you skipped ahead to this point in the video, I highly recommend you go back and watch the section on combat after hearing these points to get the full picture of what Godfall offers. It's nowhere close to as bad as the worst of what you've been hearing, so don't let this section be your only source of information. That being said, I stated in the intro that I don't care about the lore, writing, level design, graphics, pretty much anything that doesn't have to do with combat in a combat-centric game. Action RPGs, some would say, are the ultimate example of an action game, and because Godfall nails the most important feature in its genre, the action, I am less impacted by all of its faults. However, it definitely does have faults. First, the story. Yes, it's boring. No, I didn't care about the characters. Yes, I was trying to skip every single cutscene despite the game never allowing me to. Next, the level design. It's not linear, which is what I've heard is being tossed around, but it is boring. Spawn into a shared world, much like when you choose a destination on Destiny, and traverse the zone following your objective marker and occasionally looting materials or killing things in your way. The missions themselves are also bland. It's a whole lot of reach this point and kill this dude, which again, I didn't really expect anything else from an action RPG, to be honest. I wasn't looking for Breath of the Wild level puzzles or dialogue driven missions where your conversation with characters impacts the outcome of the story. So if you're looking for that kind of stuff from Godfall, it's gonna leave you disappointed. I've already mentioned these next few things in detail earlier, but I'll cover them again here quickly. Valor plates are boring and offer no real impact on your gameplay. They are not build enablers or classes and are used to min-max your build and nothing more. Ailments are a complete joke and literally all do the same same thing just with different names and colors. Every single thing knocks you down. Can some of these maybe just interrupt my attack and nothing else? Does it always have to be a knockdown? Like, holy moly. In-game activities are limited and offer no real depth outside of the loot grind itself. The combat and theory crafting carry the game for a bit into the end game, but there is not enough substance as the game currently stands to warrant a real grind. I want to end the overview here with the list of suggestions I have based on what I've experienced. The list is in order of importance to the overall game. Number 1, incentive for the Tower of Trials. The best gear should come from the hardest content. Have items dropped within each zone, scale with the level, and give increased stats accordingly. Number 2, where are my resistances? Hello? Defense tab? Maybe put in like, I don't know, right here and separate offense and defense stats into different sections. Number 3, a search menu for items and augments. This small quality of life would save a lot of time. Number 4, speaking of saving time, a salvage all option, as well as locking or favoriting certain items. The devs have already stated that a salvage all option is in the works for the next patch, but until I see it in the live game for myself, I'm just gonna state it here. Number 5, skill loadouts. You can save your items and augments as a loadout for each Valor plate, but not your skills. Kind of silly. Number 6, menu hotkeys. You can use Q and E to go between gear and augments, but not go between the other tabs, and no hotkeys function inside of the Forge. Hello? I don't know what's going on there. 7, last and actually least, can we get an in-game map? It would look pretty. The waypoint system is already good enough for traversing these zones, but a map would give the game some much needed world building and also look great. And that is all I have to say about Godfall. I enjoy the game a lot despite its many shortcomings and glaringly obvious rush to release in time for the PlayStation 5 launch. Hopefully in due time the game becomes worthy of its price tag to all players and not just the ARPG enthusiasts like me. You can check out my stream at twitch.tv/Woolie Gaming, where I stream regularly about 4 days every week, and also consider joining our Discord server as well. Thank you for watching, and please developers, pull this bad boy off.